The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, real quick before we get started here, I'm going to do a quick introduction. I'll hand it over to Brian. We got a lot of stuff to go over in the next hour. So welcome to today's section, Community Corrections Virtual Roundtable on the Front Lines Against COVID. I'm Travis Johnson, your moderator for today's session, and I'm a Grants Program Associate with APPA, and we're happy you're here. Real quick, APPA serves the community corrections field as its leading professional membership association. Our work is supported by thousands of passionate members throughout the United States and Canada, as well as other countries actively involved in strengthening their community corrections work. Everything we do at APPA is aimed at reducing recidivism to keep our community safe and ensuring that the community corrections industry is supported in order to fulfill that purpose. We're proud to announce that our annual training institute will be held entirely online this year, August 24th through 28th. Registration recently went live, and you can visit APPA's website to learn more. If your work intersects with the world of community corrections, you don't want to miss this one. STCs, CEUs, and training contact hours will be available upon request. Before we turn over to today's facilitator for today's session, I just want to go over a few housekeeping rules. Everyone's microphones should be muted. Please double check. Throughout the presentation, feel free to submit any questions throughout the questions pane of GoToWebinar. Also at the GoToWebinar pane at the bottom there in the handouts tab, you'll find a certificate of attendance. If you want to download that, keep it for your records, please feel free to do that. And after the roundtable concludes, there'll be a quick short survey about today's webinar, just to provide some feedback for APPA so we can make the next one better for you guys. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded and it will be distributed through the typical APPA channels and found on our COVID-19 resource page as well. Also, if you have any technical difficulties, lose sound, lose connection, something like that, please feel free to shoot us a message in the chat. So let's get right into it. We've got a lot of discussion in the next hour. Real quick, I'll introduce our facilitator for today, Dr. Brian Levins. He's the APPA President-elect, former Assistant Director for Harris County, and currently Principal for Justice System Partners. All right, Brian, it's all yours.
Great, thanks Travis, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Quite excited to and then move into this third version of the COVID-19 series. Our first version was really early on in the process and talking to several of the chiefs across the country. Then the second one was around kind of recovering from or transitioning from COVID-19 and kind of where we are and what space we see the future in. And today I think is my most exciting or my most kind of cherished one, which is we're talking to some folks on the front lines around their experience kind of at the beginning of COVID-19 through the middle, and then what they see the future of COVID-19. As Travis talked about, APPA is an international organization designed to help people provide services and help agencies provide services around reducing recidivism. And so we're really here to help support. And so as President-elect, I work with the executive team and Tim Hardy, the president for the organization, and Veronica Cunningham, the executive director. And so our team works with both the APPA staff and members to help really design and develop a platform for people to learn around community corrections, to share great ideas, and hopefully to improve the field and for those that we serve. And so we're quite excited. On our website, we have a resource guide for COVID-19. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, we have a significant amount of research around COVID-19, strategies to help. We have links to other services and other agencies and resources, and so please feel free to join us there. And so today's conversation really is around the work, around hearing from the staff and their experiences through this. And so we're quite excited. We have Alicia Hitt, who may be joining us here in a few minutes. And then we have Alex Jones and Matthew Powell. So I'll have Alex introduce himself, tell us a little bit about his work in Multnomah, and then Matthew will follow up with his work in CSOSA, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, everyone. It's a good morning for me. I'm on the Pacific time over here on the on the West Coast. It's probably afternoon for y'all. But my name is Alex Jones. I'm a parole and probation officer with Multnomah County here in Portland, Oregon. And currently I am part of a unit that's called it's a Justice Reinvestment Program, where basically the state of Oregon is, in a nutshell, is giving the county money to do some diversion to basically not build new prison and trying to keep people in a community. I've been with the agency since 2016. Before this, I was a manager in juvenile detention out in Washington, D.C. area, which only lasted a couple years. And then I spent 14 years as a military police officer in the United States Air Force before that. So thank you. Welcome.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Matthew, if you'll take a chance to introduce yourself and tell us a little about you. And then Alicia has joined us, so she'll introduce herself after.
All right, how's everybody doing? My name is Matthew Powell, and I'm a community supervision officer with the Court Services and Offender Supervision Agency, better known as CSOSA, in Washington, D.C. CSOSA is an independent federal agency, and we provide probation and parole, community supervision services for clients that are returning from the Federal Bureau of Prisons, as well as sentenced under the DC Code. And so that's pretty much what the agency is about. Myself, I'm a sex offender supervision officer. I'm on the high intensity supervision team. I'm embedded within the sex offender unit. So all of my sex offender clients are intensive, which is our highest level of supervision.
Alicia, I think you've joined us as well. If you can hear us, if you'll introduce yourself. All right, looks like we may have a little bit of technical difficulty with Alicia, so as soon as she's able to join in and get connected, we'll have her jump in there and introduce herself. But no reason to kind of wait for this conversation, and so the first question that comes to mind, Alex, Matthew, is hey, tell me about the first couple days, right? The first week, the first couple weeks of COVID-19. How were you guys dealing with it as staff? What were some of the struggles? And kind of how did it start? How did you kind of approach this kind of transition from face-to-face agency work really to probably something virtual, but love to hear about that as well. So maybe Alex, if you'll start with kind of what was it like in the front lines in the first couple of days of the COVID-19 hitting in Portland.
The first couple of days was actually more shocking for people, more like in like awe, basically like, is this real? Like, is this really happening? Because the things that were coming down, people couldn't believe it. Like, what do you mean you don't want me to come to my building? You know, it was kind of, people were really shocked about that, and it was hard to adjust. But at the end, people started figuring it out, but it pretty much came to a halt. Everything came to a slow snail pace. And the biggest challenge of that was there was information coming from everywhere. At work you had departments, emergency operations centers, police. Everybody was just throwing information from their departments, which made it very, very difficult to kind of funnel through. But the first few days was definitely a shock. The clients that I did have on board, they didn't even understand it. Everybody was kind of like, what do you mean I can't come get these services? Or what do you mean I can't get to this building today? It was a little chaotic at first. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine really, right? So, the population isn't necessarily as trusting of the system anyway. And now it's, oh, don't come see me, or you're not allowed in. I'm sure there's lots of people that were pretty scared about their kind of what the future holds, and are they going to be in good standing for their supervision and that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Matthew, what was it like for you guys?
It was pretty much the same. There was a lot of information to digest. Initially, like, we were still in the office. when it first kind of happened, and then like a lot of our supervision officers there, have children, and schools were talking from one side, and so from the personal side, we were getting a lot of information from that side, and from the employment side, we were also getting a lot of info. There were still some functions going on as far as like hearings and things of that nature, where some officers had to like go into the jail to do revocation hearings or things of that nature, which raised the level of anxiety a little bit. Thinking that I could be infected or I could bring it home, things of that nature. So it was pretty much the same type deal. Our agency did act pretty quickly and put measures in place to try to protect the officers as best as possible, but still maintain those functions. So it was just a lot of information to digest, and from a supervision standpoint, like of course not having the face-to-face contacts anymore was big. But as far as the clients and stuff go, like you said, it was difficult for them as well. Making sure they're in some good standing and telephone calls all the time, things of that nature. Some clients even continued to report even though we weren't, going to be seeing them, just because of, the level of anxiety that went up with them as well. So it took a little time to get used to, but it's getting back to normal slightly with this whole virtual deal.
Okay. When you guys, so in DC and in Portland, were you identified as kind of within your communities as first responders or necessary personnel, or did you guys work from remotely? What did that look like in those first couple of weeks?
Initially we, it's kind of like everything shut down. And then I know there was some language and stuff that came out from the unions, because initially we wasn't, we've never been first responders, but they did label us essential personnel within weeks of it. But we haven't really been inside of the office at all. I mean, I literally haven't seen a client in probably about 3 months face to face. But we haven't been acting as any first responders, and we've been deemed essential personnel, and we've had to maneuver around some of our staffing plans as far as on our campuses and stuff like that.
Yeah, for CSOSA, it's been the same deal. We weren't considered first responders, but we were considered essential personnel. They moved to like having more of like a duty officer type of implementation, where we wouldn't have a fully staffed office, but you would have a certain day that you would go in and you would be responsible for the services that day. And as time progressed, it eventually got to the point where the offices were closed down. CSOSA does have what they call a rapid engagement team, which are CSOs that maintain a status. They work like shift type work, and they're able to go out to the community to engage clients and things of that nature, through use of MPD, which is the Metropolitan Police Department. They work very closely with them, things of that nature. So they've been the ones that pretty much taken on the face-to-face aspect of the supervision, and that's usually triggered if an officer has an issue. We'll ask them to go and do some engagement in the community. But from our standpoint, it's been pretty much the same, working from home. Like Alex, I haven't seen a client in person since like March 24th or something like that. So it's been pretty much the same deal.
Okay, can I ask Matthew a question?
Hello, can anyone hear me?
Oh, here she is.
Hi, Alicia, how are you?
Hi, how are you guys? I'm sorry, having technical difficulties with these cameras and stuff, so I just put it up on my phone.
No worries. We appreciate it, and we're excited that you're able to join us. I know we've all become quite flexible and nimble with technology these days. I have 3 kids who were, I guess, not homeschooling anymore, although we haven't told them that school has ended yet. So they still go to school every day in their office, so we can get some stuff done. So you'll probably hear them in the background as well. So if you don't mind, if you could introduce yourself, tell folks who you are and what you're doing and where you work and kind of your role in Harris County.
Okay, so I'm Alicia Head. I work for Harris County Juvenile Probation Department. I am a field JPO and also a school-based JPO. So I'm actually more specialized. I'm housed at one of the local high schools where I supervise all the youth that are on probation that attend that high school, as well as those that attend those schools that feed into that high school. I do still also supervise some outlier cases that are in my area, but majority of my caseload at this time is coming from that school pipeline. It definitely has been different not being at the school, because I went from being at the school 3 to 4 days a week to now being completely at home. So this has been a huge adjustment for myself as well as the youth that I serve, because my youth, unlike a lot of the youth that other youth I supervise in field probation, they had gotten accustomed to seeing me daily and regularly in their commutes, to school, and even some of those after school activities in which I would partake in as a part of, that continual support.
Great, thanks. And so to catch you up, we've talked a little bit about kind of the first couple days or the first couple weeks within COVID-19, and I know being in Harris County as well, the schools got kind of postponed or online right after spring break, and so as folks were kind of transitioning back from spring break, the kids were staying at home. What was that like for the first couple of weeks for you as a probation officer who was working in the schools?
It was a little bit of a culture shock. I think we all were going through a culture shock. I was just kind of perplexed as to how I was gonna manage not having contact at all, considering I had so much contact. But eventually, I made a regimen, and we went to, instead of doing face-to-face, we utilized a lot of FaceTime, telephone contacts to maintain contacts. I began to engage in really helping and assisting my probationers get enrolled in school, like those who were in placement, because there was a big release. There were a lot of mass releases from our detention centers as well as residential facilities, which is really great because our numbers have gone down drastically as far as placement. But I had to do a lot of assisting and trying to get them re-enrolled in school because they couldn't report to school, but we couldn't have them just sitting out here in limbo doing nothing. So I became very active in being that liaison for the families, communicating with the district as well as the administration at my school to get my youth enrolled.
Great. Alex, you had a question earlier that you wanted to ask.
I wanted to follow. I heard Matthew mention the rapid engagement team, and that is a collective of individuals who are going out, responding to things in the community. Is that like working for most people? Because I know that some people don't have a relationship with maybe some of the clients they may be going to respond to. How's that working?
For us, a lot of times when we're interacting with the rapid engagement team, it's usually with the client that we may be having a little bit of issues with compliance, things of that nature. So those are going to be the guys that we want to definitely engage, especially in the community. So it's been pretty good. We're pretty communicative with our clients about, hey, we're going to have officer so-and-so come see you. Sometimes it's not announced because we want, kind of maintain that element of surprise to be able to, engage and get, honest feedback from, the clients and from the rapid engagement team itself. It takes a little bit to initiate that. You got to kind of go through the chain of command and stuff. So everyone is aware of what's going on with that case, and that communication has been big. We're in the middle of our summer crime initiative right now in DC. So of course, usually it's a lot of home visits and knocking on doors and stuff like that, but right now it's really not. So we have the rapid engagement team is taking on the task of kind of meeting in the communities in certain sections of the city, like in parks and things of that nature, and we have the clients come to them. So that's something else that we've been doing lately, which has been pretty effective, I think, and it will probably continue throughout the rest of the summer.
Thank you.
Here in Harris County, we've actually started to implement, starting June 15th, we went to doing drive-by home visits. So if you are a field officer with a caseload, then we now supervise our high-level supervisory cases by doing a once a week drive-by home visit. Now with that, we stay in our cars, we wear a mask. And we're pretty much calling the youth, having them come out, stand a sufficient distance away from the vehicle, and we're doing our check-ins like that, just so that we could reconnect with our youth and start to kind of phase back into somewhat of a face-to-face contact.
So when you guys are doing the in-person or kind of in-car connections, are you connecting virtually with folks and they're coming out on their front porch and visually seeing people? How are you working that out?
Yes, they're actually coming out of the home. So we will contact them. Usually what I personally do is I schedule mine, so my youth know that I'm coming. It's not just a pop-up, it is scheduled. And then once I arrive, I give them a phone call. They come out of the home, and like I said, a porch, or if they live in an apartment, we're in the parking lot, but they stand, far enough distance away from the car, roll the window down, and we just have a short, brief little dialogue about what's going on, what the needs are, how services are going, what services need to be implemented. And then from there, I follow up via phone with whatever we discussed in that meeting. So they usually can last, depending on the need of the youth, I say anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes. Just depending on what the discussion is. A lot of times my youth's parents will also join in, so they'll come outside as well. So yeah, it just really depends on what it is you're discussing, but they can get pretty lengthy.
Okay. What were the biggest challenges you think for the clients? And so as they transition, what do you guys think, like, what did you hear from them and what they're facing, not only with necessarily with probation, but even beyond probation? What did you hear from them?
Are we going in alphabetical order?
Any of you guys can jump in.
Oh, okay. I think the biggest thing, one of the biggest challenges was certain populations being able to access technology, and being able to use that technology, utilize the technology when they actually did it. But the biggest, a lot of them had concerns, which is kind of ironic that now that we're in COVID, a lot of them had worries and anxiety and concerns that they felt like they wasn't getting their calls returned now more than ever. So they had this kind of disconnect from, I would call, their anchor in their supervision now. That was some of their biggest concerns, and not being able to connect to resources. Those were some of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, from that aspect as well, like definitely the connection to resources has been pretty challenging. In particular with the sex offender population that I supervise, housing and things of that nature have been increasingly becoming an increasing challenge, especially with like some of the transitional programs and things that we have for like our homeless populations were, pretty much hit kind of hard. One situation we had like a transitional house that had to close due to several individuals becoming infected, including a couple of my clients. And the housing that they found in one particular instance was out of the jurisdiction, and being like on a registered sex offender list and stuff like that, they couldn't just move. So that put them in a difficult time, and anxiety shoots through the roof. And it just so happens that these individuals also have some mental health components. So that's a big deal. And so just trying to make sure we maintain that contact with like our agency partners in the community, to try to provide resources as best as possible has been, pretty challenging not being there. But, as everybody starts to transition to the virtual space, like it's becoming a little bit easier, right now.
I would say here, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I would say here with this demographic I've been working with, displacement and homelessness has become a big challenge. It was something I didn't see with the population initially, but with COVID and finances, a lot of loss of employment. I see a lot of my youth being displaced, having to move in with family, friends, and some, relatives, some having to relocate altogether. So just the homelessness, the displacement, and with that, of course, there was the technology issues, having the access to the resources that they needed to actually fulfill the online coursework for the remainder of the school year. So I would say that was the biggest thing I saw with my family. But keeping the services in place that they had has been really effective. A lot of the resources we use here in Harris County, the Harris Center, our mental health, our revision program, they have aided us greatly in being able to get food to our youth, being able to continue those mental health services. Our mentoring program, HCAP, I've been able to get a lot of my youth linked up with mentors so that they're not going stir crazy and able to kind of, have somebody to talk to and an outlet. So we've been doing really good there, but the displacement and homelessness has been very prevalent since COVID-19 kind of came into play in March.
I know this is going to be a tough question, right? And I really appreciate everyone who's kind of working day to day in the field. At some point, it had to been pretty anxiety driven for you guys. With not having, we still don't have clear answers, right? We still don't really get all the information, or we get information that's mixed and confusing and sometimes not communicated well. What was it like, or what's it been like, especially early on, not knowing kind of how COVID-19 was passed along from folks, and having a job where people are coming in and out of office space and kind of presenting a risk to you guys and your health as well.
I can start. I know for me personally, it was very nerve-wracking. I think at the beginning of this, we were still working from the office. So it wasn't until our judge actually implemented a stay-at-home, work-from-home safe order that we then were forced to work from home. And at that point, of course, we were at home the whole time. But prior to that, those first couple weeks, we were still reporting to the office, and we were about to start implementing an alternating schedule where to, alleviate all of us being there at one time, we had an A and B rotating schedule where half of us would go, and then the next week, the other half would go, and so forth. So it was very, very just nerve-wracking knowing that I still have to report to the office and then could possibly come in contact with someone with it and bring it home to my children and my husband. So, and then we have a tax office that's right down on the first floor from us. So we get a lot of traffic in that building. So yeah, it was a little unnerving, but we got it together, and now, even though we have gone back to the office, we are on that rotating A and B schedule, working every other day in the office or from home, completely quarantined in our own offices when we're present, and we are not allowing families or probationers to report to the office at this time.
And just to piggyback off of that, I think for me, one of the biggest things was knowing, after everything shut down, and still knowing that there's a possibility we have to affect an arrest at some point, and dealing with a person in a physical way like that. That's probably the most nerve-wracking thing. It's crazy because when I come home, I pull all my clothes off, all my work clothes off in the garage, so I won't bring nothing in. But I think it's important. It was definitely nerve-wracking knowing that if you go to arrest a person, you're in close proximity. You have to put your hands on them. And based on the information we was getting, we didn't know, what's the proper PPE, if we had the right PPE, like, is it even working? So all that stuff is very, very nerve-wracking, for sure.
Yeah, in the same vein, man. Like for me, I would definitely say that it started to hit home whenever we had a meeting that was going on, and an email like kind of came out saying, hey, there's potential for maybe some exposure. So we want everybody who was at that meeting to kind of self-quarantine and do their thing. And it kind of hit home then. And it was like, wow, like this thing is real. And then like in a short time span after that, Our reception and processing unit, where like all our clients come in when they first are placed on supervision or they get out of the institution, they come in there, they went completely virtual. Along with the sex offender registry, they went completely virtual as well. And then shortly after that, I have to go to a hearing at the jail. And before you can go in, they got to scan you with a thermometer, and you got to sign a waiver and all that stuff. And like that's when the level of anxiety, really increased, because it was still a little uncertainty about how we were going to have to report and things of that nature. But thankfully, like the agency was on top of it. Leadership acted quickly and implemented some plans to help try to alleviate that and help with that anxiety. But early on, it was definitely through the roof. And being like a team-oriented structure as far as supervision goes, like we had a lot of conversations amongst each other about what we're going to do, and a lot of us have children and things of that nature. So it definitely raised the level of anxiety. But it's kind of it dissipated as we saw our agency's response to the whole deal.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is as we learn and communicate, and for agencies that have good communications infrastructure, I think a lot of times it puts us at ease when we're getting information. We feel like we're in the know. I think you guys all three talked about, like in the beginning, feeling like just not sure what was going to happen or how it works and how you're going to remain safe. And so I could only imagine, just the anxiety and the amount of struggle while still trying to help people, right? And that's the real tough balance, right? It's like, folks that have jobs that could be, that aren't public facing, right? I think at times could transition a little bit easier and working from home. But here you're exposing yourself and your family and bringing things back and forth from a public-facing job. And so, and I know that, I know across the country there have been some probation departments that have had staff that have gotten sick, and others that have lost staff to COVID-19. And so, I think it's a real tough challenge, and I really appreciate you guys, standing in there and helping your people make it through this and taking the risk for yourselves and your families. So thank you, and thanks for all the folks that are on the call in their work and continuing moving this forward for folks. It's definitely a time where people were needed, and I think all three of you have talked a little bit about being a resource for people, more so not only just around probation conditions and following the expectations of court. I'm assuming that that many of your clients, like many of the ones across the country, have pretty significant health issues prior to COVID-19, which really exposes them to broader kind of issues. Can you talk a little bit about how treatment worked, right? So we know that historically, or at least traditionally, probation across the country has connected with treatment programs, but many of those are face-to-face kind of in-person treatments. And so have you had experiences, or did you have experiences with your clients where some of that moved into virtual space as well, and how were they able to negotiate maintaining sobriety and treatment around mental health issues and substance abuse issues, and even, and Matthew, even sex offender issues, right? And staying connected with treatment there as well.
We when this first initially happened, we have a lot of go-to treatment providers that are pretty much face-to-face, and they had to do a lot of scrambling to kind of get the virtual business online. It was an extreme challenge for everybody. There was an opportunity there to do it. However, you had some people that fell off due to maybe challenges of not being able to get the technology, or just saying, you know what, I don't have to go in. I'm just going to go do whatever I want to do. When they leave treatment, they're not engaged. That definitely happened. But it's still a challenge to this day, because even in addition to having the people that falls off, there's some people who just either don't want to access the technology, or they just can't access the technology.
Our resources around here in Harris County, like I said, they have kind of like kept the ball rolling nonstop. They transitioned really well into the virtual aspect of providing services, from the drug treatment, counseling, etc. Most of my youth are still communicating with therapists weekly, at least once a week. I'm communicating with those same therapists at least on a monthly basis, just to kind of stay abreast of where they are as far as the youth treatment plan and the things they're working on. And a lot of our providers, treatment providers, just like ourselves, have incorporated the drive-by system, where they're driving by the home, keeping distance, using all safety protocols, but just to put their eyes on the youth and just, maintain that reconnectiveness of seeing the child. And we've been getting really good responses from it. I guess it's something about a child being able to kind of put their eyes on you. It reiterates to them that it is real, that they are still on probation. They do still have rules of supervision that they do need to abide by until they have successfully termed. And we've just really been having a successful turnout with it.
From a CSOSA standpoint, like we're still engaging with our treatment providers. Being a federal agency, there's like a lot of contracts and things that not everybody necessarily understands. And to try to understand it all will probably make your head spin. But at the same time, we pretty much on the sex offender unit go by the containment model. So we have constant contact with our treatment providers. They made good transitions to the virtual space. And I find that my younger population didn't really have as much of an issue with transitioning to the virtual stuff, but the older guys had a little bit more of an issue. Kind of getting to that point of about making that balance between, okay, I can give you a little bit of leeway as far as this transition goes, but we got to make sure we're going to keep the interventions and services going. So being in contact with the community, being in contact with the treatment providers is the main deal. And so we have containment meetings all the time, more than once a month usually. And we just, it's all virtual, either via video or telephone call in. And that's what's just been the main thing going right now, is to make sure we're maintaining those programs.
So Matthew, I'm curious, in many jurisdictions across the country, people that have engaged or have been adjudicated for sex offenses have pretty strong conditions around being online, having computer access, having data plans on phones. Is that true for CSOSA, and is that a pretty standard set of conditions that they can't have access to internet and those kind of things? And if so, how did you guys maneuver that with the people that have engaged in sex offenses?
From our standpoint, like that is a condition that we see from time to time, but it's not the standard condition. Usually, if the client has some kind of a crime that was committed in the virtual space, like on Instagram, things of that nature, then it'll be added by the Parole Commission, which is the United States Parole Commission. And if we determine, through our assessment process that it's something that we need to monitor, then we can ask the Parole Commission or the court to modify the conditions. In the time right now, we don't have clients reporting, so it's difficult to maintain that, that condition. But they do know that it is still possible. And if, it arises, we'll have to, make the provisions for that to happen. I haven't personally had that happen yet, though.
I think that's a big benefit, because I know in many spaces they're not able to own a computer, even if their offense wasn't internet based, and so, or they're not able to access places. And so I think definitely a barrier that many of our folks that have engaged in sex offenses probably faced. So it's good that CSOSA doesn't typically practice that. It's not a standard condition. We know that obviously a lot of those things can become barriers or tripwires into kind of being successful. Tell me a little bit about, like, and I hate to use this now or this kind of a point, because it is a pretty serious, pretty significant virus. It's had major consequences. Many lives have been lost to it. But I think sometimes in these difficult times, sometimes things come out of it that are beneficial. Can you guys talk about things that you see that have shifted pretty quickly, that have actually improved your jobs or improved your ability to help people be successful?
I know for me, for us, it's been, seems like much more collaboration. I'm hearing from treatment providers, community partners much more now than I did when I was in the office day to day. I mean, I think that's because it's probably more easier to reach out, follow up on those phone calls, follow up on those emails. I think that's been like the biggest beneficial um, thing for us as far as like case planning and stuff like that, because before we're running around in the community meeting clients inside, and sometimes those tasks of phone calls and emails and case planning, sometimes it gets bumped down a little bit due to some more pressing things. So I think that's been the biggest benefit, one of the biggest benefits for us out here for that.
So one of our biggest benefits, I believe, also is the collaboration. I feel like I have developed better relationships with a lot of our community agencies that we work with, those in which I have youth that utilize their services. I'm more engaged. We're in contact, more communication, just more of a collaborative effort in working with the youth. Also, the benefit for me personally was seeing I can do this job without going to an office. I think you get so acclimated to your regimen of reporting every day. You get complacent. You feel like this is the only way that you can be successful, or the only way that you can be productive is if you have this and you have this and that. And I really had to like just tap into my own personal organization skills and get to work. And I found that I discovered a lot about myself. I'm a self-starter. I'm self-motivated. I just found myself not having the same issues some of my peers were having. And so it showed me this job can be done completely from the field. I don't have to report to an office every day to maintain communication, to do service referrals, to see my youth, but I can be at home or leave my home, do my job, and, produce what it is my deputies expect of me.
And Alicia, I think you're very fortunate to be able to do that, because that's like my dream in this particular case, because right now we're not able to do the field work. So we're, for a lot of agencies, we're kind of pinned down, because I would prefer to be mobile every day if I could. But due to being able to be at home and do certain things, the lack of the field work restricts us. So I would hope that we can do some drive-by stuff, but we can't right now. So I'm just saying it from our perspective. Like, I wish we could have that as well, because that would benefit a lot.
Yes. And as field officers, I get it. We're field officers. We're used to being in the field. So when you tell us we can only do our work from home or in an office, we kind of like, we get unnerved a little bit, like, how do we do this? But we figured it out. And like I said, our deputies have been really supportive and innovative in coming up with ways for us to reconnect and stay connected with our youth. So I am appreciative to be able to have that flexibility to be in the office a couple days, be at home a couple days, but also in the field.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all of that, man. Like, and from our perspective, at CSOSA, like, one of the things that I've recognized is that with my clients, it makes it sometimes a little easier for them to communicate whenever we're doing a video chat or over the phone, mostly because they're in their own environment and they're able to feel a little bit more comfortable about the interaction. And a lot of what we do, of course, is assessment, and it's important to gather that information. And sometimes when you have to come downtown and go through security and wait and come and sit in your office, it's like a little bit of an intimidating process. But right now, it's a little more. It seems a little more relaxed. But our jobs are still, to make those proper assessments and provide those interventions. So I've seen that with some of my clients speaking on FaceTime or on the phone, you get a little bit more information. You can kind of, find out a little bit more of those like dynamic factors that you might not see, if you're in the office, or if you're just, utilizing the static, risk assessment, things of that nature. So the level of communication all the way around has increased from clients to providers, even agency staff between each other. Like, so that's one positive that I believe has come out of all of this.
So I know, and this kind of goes into, I'm looking for, I guess, some benefits. I know we all mentioned the homeless thing, right? Sorry, Brian, I just got to ask the question because I'm just curious for information. I know we all mentioned the homeless issue amongst all of our agencies. I know you got the rapid response team, Matthew, and at least you got the drive-bys. Do you guys have anything else that y'all have focused on that particular population that has kind of worked during this, like are thinking about doing stuff as far as like targeting your, the guys who've been displaced, people that's already been homeless? Because you guys could be out in the field, has there been anything like that you have found successful or beneficial with that particular population?
Well, for me personally, it's connecting them to resources. I've noticed that the more resources I've been able to connect them to during this time, I've seen things happening. One of my families just got an apartment, so we're really excited about that. And the Harris Center is actually helping them furnish their apartment. So the Harris Center is one of our entities that we use for therapy, counseling, mental health, etc. But they also have an employment portion, as well as a portion where they will help and assist the families who utilize their services to get furniture. So now they're helping furnish the home for that family who just got into their new apartment. So like I said, really tapping into the services that we've already been using. I've learned so much about what else they do, because for the longest I thought Harris Center just specifically worked with mental health issues, but to find out that they also have their employment program, and to find out that they can assist the families with furniture, I mean, that was something new. So I guess in connecting with them and us all really coming together to work as a collaborative effort to help these youth and these families, we've been expanding our resources and our services even within certain service providers. So just referring and asking questions beyond what the scope of what I understand them to offer. I always ask my service providers, well, do you provide any additional services outside of the scope of this? And that's how I've really been helping that demographic.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same here. I'm actually not able to go out into the field, but we just have that rapid engagement component. So I haven't, seen one of my clients in the field in some time either. But yeah, as far as the housing stuff goes, like there's several shelters around the city that we try to have our clients utilize for our transient, population that's pretty much homeless. We usually do try to place them on electronic monitoring if possible. Just because of the fact that we want to be able to track them and we want to be able to protect them as well. So in the event that we don't have contact or something, rapid engagement can see where they are and go to speak with them. As far as like the housing and stuff goes, it gets a little bit more difficult when it gets to trying to place some of our clients, especially the guys with mental health concerns. We usually rely heavily on DBH and their mental health core agency for that assistance, because they do definitely have much better connections as far as finding housing and things of that nature, and can kind of walk the clients through. And a lot of them are still conducting visits, especially like the ACT teams that are in the community and the psychiatrists and things of that nature. So those guys that have that kind of connection, we try to piggyback off of it, with them as well, to say, hey, when you see this guy, you mind giving me a call so we can all talk like together on speakerphone or something like that. So that's pretty much how we've been answering that challenge.
And Alex, I would also recommend tapping into some of your local churches, especially more of the like mega churches. They have a lot of homeless resources. So I've used that. I attend Wheeler Avenue here, and they have a whole like homeless division within the church where they will assist families as well. So just utilizing, stepping outside the box and really becoming a field officer and engaging with the community even as much as the churches and the services that they will offer for that homeless population.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's tough. It's a tough population to serve through probation in regular times, right? And when you're limiting the ability for housing and connections and people being able to walk into resources and be able to connect with people, and having to do it virtually makes it even more difficult. So I appreciate, Matthew and and Alicia, your kind of role, and Alex, you know, I understand, I get it. It's a tough, you know, it's a tough piece. I'm curious. So there have been fields of study, you know, telehealth, telecounseling, that have moved, you know, some pieces to a virtual connection. Moving forward, do you see a role for staff to telecommute some, right? So to move out of offices where, you know, where there's a large conglomerate of folks coming together and being more community-based, as well as having less physical face-to-face meetings with folks on supervision and more virtual connections to them. What are your guys' thoughts on is that the right move, or should we post-COVID go back to predominantly face-to-face driven connections?
I think it's really built off. I think it should be a mixture. Because like Matthew was saying, you got to look at some of the strengths of who you're working with. Alicia works with youth. I work with adults. And like Matthew said, like I know I got some young guys, you know, 20 years old, that they're technology driven, you know. So using it as a case plan and be like, hey, this is a strength. Like, hey, man, I don't have to see you in the office this much. Let's check in this way, you know, and kind of putting those things in place as a mixture, but not as like a cookie cutter kind of thing for everyone, based on the responsivity of people might not have that technology knowledge or access to it. But I definitely think post-COVID, there needs to be more of a flexible kind of approach to the way we do business across the board, for sure.
I think, Alex, you bring up a really interesting point, because probation hasn't always been the most flexible of systems, right? And in giving line staff discretion to be able to make those decisions, lots of times they come from policy down. And so I can imagine high-risk people you can only see face-to-face, low-risk people you can see virtual, and then it becomes really difficult. You have a low-risk person who has serious barriers and doesn't understand technology, and you have a high-risk person who really would engage better in that way. And Alicia, I think about juveniles and the way that they communicate, right? I've got 3 boys, one of them a teenager. They can be in the same room with each other and are Instagramming and chatting and using technology to communicate while they're sitting 4 feet away from each other. I can only imagine engaging young people in a different way that we may not have engaged historically.
Yeah, I agree. I believe post-COVID, we will continue to use a lot of these new methods of virtual communication. I don't believe we will go one way solely or the other, but like he said, depending on your demographic, depending on your youth, you may be able to do more virtual, you know, and less face-to-face. But I do believe that there is a place for face-to-face. Some youth just need it, you know. I always tell my kids I have to VIP my face. Like, certain kids just need a physical presence in order for them to, like I said, have that reminder that you're not off probation. You know, they get comfortable, they haven't seen you in a while, and it's like, I'm free. And so there is a place for the face-to-face, but there is a benefit and an advantage to having the virtual as well. Like you said, you don't have to be in the office to get a case plan signed. You know, we've been using technology to get case plan signed now virtually for those parents who work and they can't get to the office before the office closes. And instead of this case plan sitting here and the 30 days hitting and exceeding without there being a signature, now we can, you know, sign remotely and so forth. So there has definitely been some benefits, some things that I can see stand in place. But I don't think that the face-to-face will ever completely go away. But probation has definitely become way more flexible. And I think they're headed in the right direction in that flexibility.
And also,
I went and saw the doctor the other day. Well, I had a doctor's appointment, and it took me 7 minutes. Right? The doctor called me virtually on Duo at 4:01. I was off the phone by 4:08. I had my prescription refilled and ordered and delivered to my house. right?
Mhm.
Like normally that's an hour and 50-minute process, and it took 8. And so I can imagine that some, especially folks that are employed, especially, I mean, you all three are from relatively urban areas, although Houston doesn't have a ton of, public transportation. But there's lots of folks who it takes 2 hours, 3 hours of a round trip to get to the office for a
Yes,
15-minute meeting.
and that has
And
been a big issue in the past. The commutes, just the families getting out of school, but then you're trying to make it to the office before 7, but school then let out to 4:30, and then the kids are in extracurricular activities, which we want. So you don't want to penalize them for being in extracurricular activities and not seeing you. So the virtual thing, like I said, I think we're heading in the right direction with the flexibility to be able to maintain usage of it.
And before we wrap this particular question up, also, we should look at it as an opportunity as well to teach some of those guys who may not be fluent with the technology a skill. You know what I mean? Like some of these guys may not have those skills, and it might vendor off into, whether it be searching for a job or applying for education and other benefits and stuff like that. But, those guys that we have on our caseload that are maybe struggling with it, coming up with a plan like, okay, how can we teach them the skills of using the technology? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean,
That's a great point. I think it's a great opportunity for them to get a broader look. So we're getting ready to wrap up. So folks, if you have any questions, you can chat them in, but I want to open the floor to the three of you guys to talk a little bit about if you had a magic wand, right? If you had a magic wand and to wave it and to do anything other than get rid of COVID-19, what would you have changed in the process, or what would you change in the future of community corrections?
I'll let Alicia go first. She's in alphabetical order.
So what would I change in regards to corrections? I think, like I said, the flexibility for me has always kind of been my biggest challenge with probation. I love my job. I think it's a calling for me personally, but the lack of flexibility has always kind of been that one thing that just kind of brought my spirits down about it. Having experienced this, though, I think also spoke volumes to deputies, chiefs, administration that, like I said, this can be done without there being this cookie cutter blueprint or us continuing to do things the same way we have, because that's the way we've always done it, and stepping outside of the box. So I guess if I could wave a magic wand, it would be that everyone really takes this time to embrace it for the good and the bad, and just maintain that flexibility, because we don't know, the days are constantly changing. We don't know. Here in Houston, our numbers are constantly rising. So we open, but now I'm starting to see stuff kind of shut back down slowly. We may be in this space off and on for a while. So we have to always be innovative in our thinking, and flexible and adaptable. And I think that goes for even outside of COVID, because every case is not the same. Every family is not the same. What works for one may not work for the other. You have work issues, you have parents and supervision issues, and we just have to be more understanding, empathetic, and accommodating for those different issues. It can't always just be, well, it's this way, or the child or the family is punished, because at the end of the day, children don't have a say. They don't have rights. They're at the beckoning of their parents. And a lot of times I see the youth get penalized because of their parents' failure to follow through, or to communicate, or to get them where they need to be. And I see a lot of responsibility falling on the youth, that if it was a youth that wasn't on probation, we wouldn't be putting that same expectation on them. So just remembering we are dealing with kids, and that flexibility is necessary when you're dealing with children, because the adults are the ones that are pretty much running and governing everything regarding that child's life. So yeah, if I could wave a wand, it would be maintaining the flexibility and adaptability and the empathy and the care and TLC that I've been seeing everyone display during this time of COVID, the togetherness, the collaborativeness.
Alex, magic wand?
If I had the magic wand, I would say going forward, being more mobile and accessible to the community, and actually explaining to the community what we actually do. as an opportunity, because everybody knows the social climate of wanting to defund programs in police and law enforcement. And if you listen closely, our communities are asking for things that parole and probation departments across the nation already have. And if I had the magic wand, I would be like, how do we bridge the gap? Because we have people that are so diverse in our departments that got mental health backgrounds, psychology degrees, counseling, case management, all that stuff the community asks for, we already have it. So that would be my magic wand. How do we bridge the gap? Seeing that there's a lot of defunding conversation coming on, to say, look, we got these things already in place. Let's get out there and give it to the community. So.
Awesome. Matthew?
Yeah, Alice pretty much took the words right out of my mouth. I was gonna.
It's always tough to
I was gonna
Sorry.
piggyback off that because because like from the beginning of my time in C-Social, I've been there 11 years, and we're not called probation officers or parole law. They call us community supervision officers, and I felt like at this time the community is in need of our services more than ever. A lot of us, like Alice said, come from different backgrounds and stuff like that, and community engagement has always been a pretty big role. So now being able to work from home and work from the community to kind of reduce our footprint in the office and be out more, I think would be something I think would be beneficial going forward, man. So if I had that magic wand, that would definitely be my thing. I would wave it over. Especially even from a financial standpoint, being able to reduce the amount of office space that's needed and have people in the community, like all around, I think it could be beneficial. So if I had that magic wand, that's what I would try to look towards.
Awesome. No, I wish I could give you guys one. And Alex, you obviously, we're not just dealing with COVID-19. We're also dealing with racial equity and looking at how the system responds to Black and brown folks, and you could add women in there. And so I think this conversation is bigger than COVID-19. It's bigger than any one of us. And I absolutely agree. I see probation moving forward as an element of helping people support behavioral change and really changing their life and providing those support services. And I totally agree with you that probation agents and community supervision officers are one of the kind of most robust population. We've got folks with criminal justice background, social work, counseling, education, health, right? And so I think you have an incredible opportunity to step forward in the field and help people get better. And I think this is the time, right? And so I really appreciate the conversation from the three of you guys. I really appreciate you, really risking your family and your safety and your health every day and your work and being there for people that are less fortunate and are disenfranchised from our systems. And so I just want to say thank you guys. I want to thank everyone on the panel. Thank everyone in the audience as part of this. Also want to remind folks that we have our annual training institute is this summer, so August 24th through 28th. And so we'll be talking more about these and technology and the intersect of race reform at that conference. So please, if you haven't registered, think about registering. And I know that as president-elect, and I know again as President Tim Hardy, we are incredibly interested in helping bridge the gap with probation and helping get parole and pretrial as well, and helping get a different message out about the services that we offer folks and what we can do. And so we're quite excited about this next year. We're going to start transitioning some of the stuff, to a 12-month model with APPA and being able to do more of this and having conversations with people in the field. So thank you guys very much. We really appreciate it. Thank everyone for joining, and we look forward to hearing from everyone in the next institute.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are we supposed to stay on? I see y'all still there. I said, what's going on?
Thank you guys. Appreciate you.
Yeah,
All right,
thanks,
thank you.
Brian. I appreciate it. How do I hang up this thing here?